this. I've witnessed it at first hand with Harriet Harman. I remember on an occasion where Harriet Harman startled a room full of people. But when she said, somebody was saying, you know, that mothers must have choice and they must have the option of staying at home, or indeed fathers of staying at home to look after children. And she said, well, absolutely, they must have choice. If they want to stay at home and do nothing all day, that's up to them. And she really did say that. I mean, and she is the embodiment to me of, reminding us of this. But I mean, I get a lot of stick from Guardian people when I talk about men in skirts feminism. But that to me is what's happened. I'm 55. I can remember when I was at university, there were men's group. A lot of feminism was about men changing their ways. It was definitely not about women becoming as nasty as men. I mean, you know, the problem was that men were bloody unpleasant, causing wars, blah, blah, all the cliches that we had in the 60s and 70s. But it was absolutely true. The last thing we wanted was a whole lot of other men only to have what happened was this disinvestment of the domestic household economy, as Avner Offer puts it all in minute detail if you want the scientific evidence in his book, The Challenge of Affluence. And you had both genders basically disinvesting out of the household and this sort of ghastly Americanization really of our society. So, as you may know, my position ultimately in my book was to say, well, given that we are affluenza-stricken, perhaps the only way you're going to be able to persuade people to take the role of caring for small children seriously is to pay the national average wage to any family which has a child under the age of 3. Now, you can argue, I'm not a social administrator, but I was just chucking that idea out. You know, there were howls of derision at this proposal. But my main point of trying to make it was to say, well, actually, given that we're all so obsessed with our widescreen TVs and all that, we have to have all this crap. Well, okay, if that's where everybody's at the moment, then you know perhaps this would be a way of seducing everybody into actually thinking that there is status in staying home and looking after children. And quite apart from that, in fact, it's incredibly satisfying, very mean job. Not to mention the fact that it's much more mentally healthy for your children. But howls of derision. Now, a couple of years later, of course, we have you know, the banks needing some more money, and the bailout of the banks. I mean, shed loads more money than it would have cost to do what I proposed. And we have Gordon Brown saying he'll do whatever it takes. Well, you know, Gordon, what about doing whatever it takes just to have a mentally healthy society? What about that? Yes. You know, if we can afford these hundreds of billions of pounds, I mean, the sums of money are dizzying. They are so enormous. The sums of money that have been just, you know, voted in. You know, can we have a little bit of that action for doing this? What about the 60 billion for Trident? What about the 1% of the British land mass that mysteriously has not been privatised, that belongs to the Ministry of Defence? Couldn't we possibly flog? I mean, why do we have to have the whole of Salisbury Plain? If you look at a map, I went through Wiltshire recently. It's a socking great area in the middle that's got nothing there. Well, I mean, you could sell that land and you could easily afford to pay parents to stay at home. I think it would also, there's a huge amount of evidence that it would be immensely popular as a plan, which is why it's so interesting that they haven't adopted it. Because if you actually look at the evidence on, well, you can look at any way you like on the full-time parents website. If you look at this, the Little Britain's report on the Policy Exchange website, or a Next Generation study, this is a weird situation where I'm actually quoting you something that came from Ian Duncan Smith. But you know, on the Centre for Social Justice site, that study, that report is a bloody good report, the Next Generation report. And so what's going on? Well, the truth is, I think, that the ruling elite, and I'm now speaking about across all the parties, the people who live in Notting Hill, the people who live in Islington type ruling elite, they just don't get it, I think. And on the whole, this is a fundamental problem, that on the whole, that high achievers are mostly compensating for feelings of powerlessness and worthlessness through their achievement. There's a huge amount of evidence for that. So very few of them have ever cared for an under 3. I mean, I don't know if you can think of a single, I don't know whether there is anybody in Parliament who's actually cared for an under 3, or indeed has a partner who cares for an under 3 either. So, I mean, a significant proportion of the people, present company accepted, of course, who are in Parliament, I would suggest to you, are only there because they were maltreated as children, they felt deprived, they felt inadequate in some way and needed to compensate in this way. I kid you not, though. I've interviewed some of them. Peter Manderson, right at the top of the list. So I would suggest another proposal that we put back in this bill would be that all members of Parliament have to care full-time for a 2-year-old before being allowed to become an MP. So to wrap up, my basic position is that we become a society of shop till you drop, it could be you, credit-fueled consumer junkies. Thank God for the credit card. Thank God that there's just a chance that we might actually go in a different direction. I personally think the credit crunch is as big a deal as the end of the Soviet Union. Yes. I think it hasn't sunk in yet because the ruling elite is still in la-la land. You've got Mandelson trying to privatise something, the post office at the moment, which is so weird. This bill is so completely out of keeping, telling a whole lot of women they've got to go out and, with not only women, but mainly women, that they, and elderly people, that they've got to go and search for work at a time when the unemployment is going through the ceiling. What? Let us, join together, put the maximum pressure we can on the ruling elite to make a complete change of direction towards a more mentally healthy society, which puts the needs of small children way ahead of the needs of Sir Fred Goodwin to have his £700,000 pension.